back, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is Cover Art Conversations, and today we have Hebru Brantley in the building. Hi, Hebru. Thank you so much for joining today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to yap about all things creative, artsy, album cover. I did a good amount of digging, and there's a couple seeds that I heard you talk about that I definitely want to expand on as far as your creative journey. So I want to start from the beginning. And typically I ask, like, what was your creative life like as a kid, but I want to specifically know about, you growing up into family and community. So, did you come from a creative family, or were you kind of like the only like artsy black sheep in the family?
Um, within my family, like I had a lot of cousins my age or a little older, a little younger. Um, we were a basketball family,
Mm.
and so that was sort of what was preached, and that was sort of the focus and the conversation. But a lot of my cousins, not a lot, but a good number of my cousins were creative or had the ability to be creative, but their focus went more towards sports and the pursuits, in athletics, less the creative side. And so I was kind of the only one that like the creative side was the thing that really fueled me. And so that's kind of where I leaned in heavy.
I think it's so interesting. There's actually, out of the couple of handful of people that I've interviewed thus far or had a conversation with, over half have origins in sports, which is so interesting. And I think like like I don't want to say the underbelly, but the line that goes through is culture. I think that
Yeah.
always is the thing that makes art and sports come together and like that. So
Yeah.
you said that your cousins had like creative capabilities. Like, what types of things were they doing, or was it just they had the capacity to do it?
I think it was the capacity, but like they were just doing things that were like one to one. It was like again, creating or painting, like a painting or a drawing of Michael Jordan, or
Yeah.
it was still sports related things, but it wasn't things that really stretched the boundaries of creativity. It was just like I like to draw, so I'm gonna draw
Right.
my favorite basketball player or my favorite sneaker, and things like that. Um, so that was sort of kind of the realm in which they kind of stayed in.
And then when did that kind of start for you? Like, do you have an experience or a memory of you drawing or whatever, and you're like, wait, I like this. This is something that I want to continue to do.
I think for me it was like it's my earliest memories. It was always. I don't think there was ever a time where I wasn't making
Yeah.
something, drawing, painting. Yeah, I mean, coloring, like going back to coloring books. Like I was just always, you know, that was it. That's what I love to do.
Yeah, and so you were saying coloring books. So it started off with like the visual drawing aspect, or were there any other mediums? Like for me, it was singing. Like I'm a graphic designer now, and that's what I love to do. But my introduction into the creative field was singing. So was it just always for you drawing and pens and markers and crayons and things like that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was just what I had access to. Growing up, it was like growing up with a single mom and a public school education and resources. It was just markers, crayons, and pieces of paper, and so it was just that was sort of all I knew, and obviously it kind of it evolved from there. But yeah, as a shorty, it was like I would burn through coloring books.
Yeah.
That was a way my mom could keep me occupied and out of her shit.
That's always, I mean, I feel like, yeah, that's such a good engaging way without with like a low maintenance way to keep the kids here. Go
Yeah,
over there.
yeah.
And so like growing and evolving for that, what was kind of like your teen years looking like creatively? And I feel like for some people, the teen years it is really interesting because it could get really angsty. But I think it's kind of the point where you start to realize like the things that you like are being perceived. At least that's how it was when I was a teenager. I used to just like create in my room in the quiet, and then my mom was like, maybe you should find community. Maybe you should find other friends that like to do what you do. So what was your creativity like when you were a teenager?
Well, I've spoken about it before, but I think for me it was like graffiti in that
Yeah.
culture. Doing a lot of that, and that presented opportunities to have a community.
Mhm.
Going out on missions with crew and just being around a lot of young guys, mostly guys that we're all trying to figure it out. But
Yeah.
like the thing that brought us together was the culture, um, and the love for seeing our tag up as many places as possible. But um, yeah, I think that was primarily it. Between that and like still just drawing and doing as much. I mean, that was it was it. That was all consuming. I was a sketchbook kid. I stayed in my black book, or anybody's black book for that matter, and it was just always just drawing. Drawing. That was like my favorite thing to do.
I love that. That's super cool. So going from like your teen to your early adult years, college and things like that. How did what was it like in college? How was the evolution of that like?
Well, I mean, with college, it was a pivot because in college I studied film,
Hmm.
and so um, I drew a little less, but I think with more intentionality. Like when I did have time to actually do drawings and work, and then still carried over into. Um, it was more about like murals and opportunities to just do things out in the world, when and where I could. um, Less like graffiti culture, more like it was like the around that time of the birth of the phrase street art,
Yeah.
where it didn't have to be traditional graffiti. It could just be art for art's sake on the walls. So that was college primarily, and then I made some money while I was in school, putting my art on T-shirts and um, you know, create merchandise, to sell to college students, basically.
So in college, what would you say was like your source of inspiration? Like what were the types of like aesthetics and vibes visually and artistically were you into in college? Was it on like what elements of the street art?
I don't know. I think when as you get older, you start to grow your palette. Changes your there's your curiosity grows.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that's the biggest thing, where you start to look for other forms of um, other forms of you look at different forms of creativity,
yeah,
um, and your exploration just starts. I think you start to realize like there's so much more out there than you knew, and your world just becomes bigger. And so I think for me that was the case. As I got older, my world got slightly larger, each year, and my hunger for um, you know a variety of work grew. And so it changed from, again, street culture into fine art, into graphic novels, into foreign artists, European artists, um, to um, foreign comic artists, designers, etc. So I think it just continued to evolve, as I would come across new artists, day by day.
yeah. That's super dope. And I definitely do want to talk more about the graphic novels and the comics. I want to get into that a little later, but I remember hearing on another podcast that you were mentioning that Tim Burton was um, an influence to you, or an artist that you love. So like, what elements about how he was expressing himself artistically did you feel like you really gravitated towards?
I think it was just the freedom, in what he did. Sort of the carefree nature is like that's just who he is, through and through. And I thought that, like, it bled into, when you looked at him, he looked like the guy that created these things, right? And then to be able to take it from his notepad or a piece of paper and make it three dimensional, make it live action, was always fascinating because sometimes those things they don't translate well, all the time. And I thought for him, the worlds that he built, it was seamless, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of film. I think I'm inspired by film and filmmakers. So I'm always pulling I'm being referential to a lot of films and moments in cinema that, you know, I look towards that have always sort of like stuck in the back of my mind as I create things, or I search for inspiration.
I think the you having that film passion and deep knowledge is really really cool, because that adds another layer of you really understanding world building and storytelling. And I think sometimes, well, when I like speak to any kind of artist everywhere, sometimes we don't get that. So
Yeah.
I like really when artists are able to easily like tap into that. And because I'm kind of like that too. Like everything that I do, there's always like a story, or like a you can execute it through different types of through different ways. So I really think that's cool. So kind of speaking about the world building, except your world, what is kind of like your I guess, like, in short terms, what does your flow state look like when you're creating? And I also want to know, like, what does your environment have to look like physically? You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I think it changes all the time. Environment, it doesn't matter,
Yeah,
because like I, how I came up, it's like I didn't have the option for, a certain level of peace. I had to just, you know, create when and where I could, make it happen. So I've been in like, horrible situations and grimy spaces, but it helped me, it facilitated, the space I needed to, kind of knock out whatever I was working on. If it was large scale paintings, all of that. And just in terms of work, like, I think it changes, as I have gotten older and, I have kids. It's one of those things where I just try to work whenever I can, find moments. Um, every now and then I'll have, a larger block of time to really
yeah,
sort of get down, but those moments are few and far between. So I got to take the moments whenever I can get them and just tap in, learning how to tap in right when I have it, or find it in my headspace and find my calm and my peace to tap back in, because time is very very limited. A lot of
yeah. That is very difficult. I can say, like, somebody for me, I'm like, I need silence. I need nobody looking at me. I need to be in my room. I need to be this. And I find that depending on the environment or maybe the mental state, like the art kind of I don't want to say you can see it in the art, but it kind of reflects that a little bit. Do you
Sure.
feel that is the same case for you?
I think so. There's moments where it's a case by case thing, but I think there are moments where I've done a thing multiple times, right? Where I've created something, and it didn't quite hit the way I had envisioned it or wanted it to, and then I've gone back to redo it in a different environment or a different level of control, and it brings about a different result. So I do believe that that's true. Um, I'm a firm believer in that. But sometimes you just gotta work and get it done when and where you can.
Yeah, it's like I said, an artistic superpower for sure. Do you have any, I guess, like art principles or standards that you try to incorporate through every piece that you do, or is that also like a case by case thing? I know a lot of these things are case by case thing, but I'm talking like majority speaking.
I wish I could tell you I did. I think it's case by case.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, like, yeah, it's case by case. It's project by project. Um, but I wish I was cool enough to say, yeah, oh, I have a lot of principles that I apply to. But no, I have a methodology or a certain way that I work that I'll get
Yeah.
stuck to, um, no matter what the medium is. I feel like there's a common way in a lot of
Okay.
times, and then what will end up happening is after a point, I don't even call it boredom, but maybe it's boredom, but I'll switch it up
Yeah.
in a way to keep things interesting and potentially bring about a different result.
Okay.
It might feel very similar to, but I think the way that I get there sometimes is just very different, and there's subtleties that I can
Mhm.
see and point out potentially, obviously because I'm the creator,
Yeah.
that that happen as I sort of change the way in which I've approached a particular piece or project.
Yeah, that's again, like I said, like it's a case by case thing, but it's always so interesting to see certain designers, artists, creatives that are like, oh, I try to keep in mind this, or I try to, and it could be like a literal physical thing, but also, like I said, it could be a mental thing, and it's like, I wonder if we can see these types of consistencies like reflected in the work when you start to really break down certain pieces and think about certain motifs or whatever that artists continuously use in their work. It's always so interested to see because there's literally mad different ways that people can express themselves in that way.
Yeah,
Okay.
a lot of times it's more when we talk about flow state, but it is more of a meditation
Yes.
in terms of, like, I don't always think about things first. I kind of jump out the plane
Yeah.
and figure out how I'm gonna land.
Yeah.
And if I don't like the landing, I'll just go and jump out the plane again. Or I understand how to land a little bit better. But I've definitely, you know, been the type of creative that I'll do things multiple times to get to that place where it feels right to me. And I don't really mind it. I think it's a great sort of meditation to have, practice to have.
Something about that is so admirable to me personally because I it takes kind of like a lot of like over processing and over analyzing before I can get there. And it's like in a weird way, I almost have to like trick myself to get like if we're using the analogy, like to just jump off the plane and figure it out after the fact. Um, so I think that's really cool that you could just you're like we just we just gotta trust ourselves creatively. We just gonna figure it out. So yeah, that's very cool, super dope as well. So now I want to talk about Cabin in the Sky.
Okay.
Um, so there's so many things I want there's so many things I want to talk about actually. So let's start with the reach out. So what was that conversation or like or that ask like um for that project?
It was pretty easy. I mean, I've been a fan of De La since I was a kid. Um, those they're like big cousins, young uncles to me, and not in a personal sense, but in terms of just my journey into manhood, into fatherhood. Their music has soundtracked my life and my journey. And so um, when I talked to Merce, in my mind, he was pitching me on it, but in my mind, it was already a yes
Mhm.
to be a part of that catalog of music. Um, just in that way where it's like cover art. I feel like cover art used to hold far more weight and significance than it does now because there's not much, although actual record sales are up again.
Yes,
um,
yes.
I think that by and large, like the masses, folks don't go out and buy records or CDs anymore. So cover art is kind of become a lost art form in a way. Um, but to be a part of that still meant a lot to me. And so, he kind of explained uh, what the album was and was going to be. And it was a quick conversation, the first conversation. It was, again, I already knew I was going to say yes because I just wanted to be a part of it.
So that initial conversation, the initial conversation and the pitch, were there any like visual specific aspects of what the cover art was going to look like at that point, or was it like that was all on you to determine?
No, so Merce had some ideas, and he shared that with me, and it was. And I just kind of went back and did some quick sketches and sent him a bunch of drawings, and then it was just kind of like this. I like this, but let's do this like this, and add, which is typically the way that I work anyway. To really have that dialogue with the person I'm working with, working for, et cetera, et cetera. It's just easier than me going off into a corner and making a thing, spending all this time, and then they're like, that's not quite the vision.
Yeah.
For something like this, it's a lot different than my studio practice, where my work in the studio is my art. It's coming from me, and like I'm presenting it in this way. Versus this is a collaborative form of art, and this is what's representing them and their vision. And so, taking cues from them, uh, them being De La, was really important. And I appreciate collaboration. I really love uh, moments when I get to do that because they're few and far between. It's being a studio, a painter, a sculptor is far more isolating. I'm working with myself on my stuff as
Yeah.
opposed to being able to work with others to create the thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that it's always so interesting, and I really respect the kind of like Frankenstein process of it, of what feels good and what is aligned to the music, and what is this doesn't sound like how this would feel like. Like, I think
Right.
building that is my favorite, is my favorite part of specifically creating album covers. So were you able to hear anything? Were you able to hear any of the music beforehand, or?
Uh, I'm trying to remember. Did I hear anything? I don't think so. I don't think so. No. Sometimes when I do stuff with artists, I do get the music early. I can't remember why I didn't, but was also it was also time was not on our side in terms of
Yeah,
when the work was needed to be turned in. So I had to just go.
yeah,
But
that's
again, it's one of those things. It's De La Soul. Like I grew up on their music. I know their, for some of their songs backwards and forwards. So it wasn't hard for me to, even though I feel like every album is a progression,
Yeah.
the foundation is still there, and it's strong enough for me to wrap my head around what the next thing could potentially be or sound like.
And I love when artists and creatives get to work with other artists who they are very familiar with their discography and things of that sort, like a true appreciator of the art. I think that's really cool. So did you, when coming up with the concept, was it like, because we talked about like understanding the past albums and things like that, were you taking into consideration anything that they've already done? Were you kind of like, I want to do something different, or I still kind of want there to be some sort of relevance to all the work as a brand? What was your thought process as far as developing the concept for the visual?
Well, it came from when we talked, and when we talked about it, this wasn't like some daisy age stuff. It wasn't drawing from any of the other sources that are more like synonymous with the with the band.
Mhm,
Um, this was an ascension
mhm,
from all of that, and so it needed to feel that way. And looking at their last, couple of covers, it's always been that they've never sort of gone back, and this wasn't the moment to do that, and that was a part of our early discussion as well. And I think that uh, they had a very clear vision of what it needed to feel like.
okay.
Um, it's a feeling more than like having. Again, there was conversations around the aesthetic, but the feeling uh, and what they were trying to evoke within that cover was very, very clear to me. So it was very easy to just kind of get to that place where it's like, okay, it's either this or this.
Yeah. I think that channeling that feeling is, again, it's still like a specific talent. I don't everybody don't got that to be able to for it to be like a perfect alignment in that way. Or maybe I don't want to say perfect, but for an alignment that makes the most sense, because any type of trying to connect any type of art to the music, it's like, oh yeah, this is a good art, but it doesn't really like match the vibe. Um, so I'm I appreciate that, the way that that connection was able to be made in that way. So I'll say like two things specifically about the piece that I liked. The clouds. And like I know that we see like a lot of cloud motifs with like you and your personal projects. So, and then I also noticed like artistically there was kind of like two different kinds of clouds, like the main one and then the background. So I know you said you kind of are the type of person to like create first and then process later, but was there any like conscious intention behind developing those small details in within the album cover?
It was just more about all of more of that, like that came into the conversation between
Yeah.
me and them, and what they had in mind.
Mhm.
um, but also I think it's because you're dealing with subjects foreground, and like you have these clouds in the back. There needed to be a difference, right, a stark contrast between the two, so that you can push the subjects further forward,
Right.
and you know that background can sort of fall back and do what it needs to do. So, but again, this was the brilliance of of, of Merce and Maceo, and just knowing what they wanted it to feel like.
Yeah, I think that was translated very well. Do you and I should have asked this before because this might be a question that you have to think about. But um, do you have in general like any album covers that have always been memorable or significant or a favorite of yours?
Yeah, a bunch. I think a few that come to mind off top would probably be uh, the Smith and Wesson first album that's sort of appropriating the Roy Ayers album cover of the Cypher, uh, the GZA's first album, Liquid Swords. Um, oof. I think mostly every try, like, well, Low End Theory, Midnight Marauders are definitely two album covers that have always just lived rent free in my head. Midnight Marauders album cover was just insane. I know there's a bunch I'm forgetting and blanking on, but yeah, I think I would absolutely look and kind of get lost in organized confusion. Um, get the name of the album. It was their, I think it was the second album. Might have been their first, but I feel like their first album was Equinox. I might be mixing it up, but it's the one with this crazy illustration on the front of both of them. It's I don't know. I love that fucking album cover. But I tend to go between photo covers and then heavily art heavily artistically created covers with
Yeah,
paintings or illustrations, and then sometimes ones that are just super crude. I love it, all of MF Doom's early covers. KMD stuff too. Those were always dope. Little drawings, and it felt so uh, connected to OG graffiti work, graffiti art.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah. I love album. I mean, I could album cover art in general, and just like learning. It's like a never ending. It's so many dope fires, and you got like so many dope album covers, and you have alternative covers and different alterations and things like that. Like it's just always been um it's always been super memorable. But as far as the another question I had about the cabin in the sky was the color palette for me. I think was really important, and I've personally been a lot into colors lately. Um, and I just think that the brightness of it is significant to the subject matter of the album, and the message that that they're trying to convey. I think it was important that those colors have that high saturation and high hue, because it could have been not doom and gloom, but you know what I'm saying, like it could have been more edgy, angsty, and things like that. So do you consider these types of things as well when creating, or is it feels like you give the type of art, you seem like the type of artist that things just feel like intuitive kind of.
I think it is a big part, intuition and being intuitive.
Yeah,
But I think for something like this, the vibe that I got or what I understood this to be was a celebration of life
yeah, yeah,
and brotherhood. And so in that, it needs to feel that. You need
yeah.
to feel that from the visual. So that was my intention.
Yeah, I think we definitely get that with the blues and the yellows and how things are highlights, and even like little details, like there's like little glints, and how the house is bursting. Like I think um all of these, it was a really good execution of the
Thank you.
album as far as the
Thank
visual is
you.
concerned. That was really good. Okay, so kind of now talking about more specifically about your craft and principles and things like that. I want to talk about the Flyboy graphic novel because I
Okay.
think that's so fire, so cool. And the way that you talk about kind of like dipping and dabbing into different mediums, I think is really fascinating. So, developing the graphic novel, what has been your favorite part about the process thus far?
Honestly, all of it, I'm just in love with. I think seeing, I like I say, I love any opportunity to collaborate,
Hmm.
especially when it's you collaborating with people that you hold at such a high regard, and everybody who's working on this thing is the shit, and knows their stuff. And with regard to the team I assembled for the graphic novel, I think everybody is A1. My artist who's doing the interior illustrations in the book, Sajad Saha, like Sajad and I have been working together for probably over 10 years. And there just wasn't anybody I trusted more to do this, to bring this stuff to life. He really helped early days come up with the look and worked with me to come up with the look for certain characters.
Yeah,
And so yeah, it was an easy thing. And I think now my favorite thing is literally like we are almost finished with we all the scripts for issues 1 through 5 are done, and we're in the art phase. There's 6 issues total, be comprised into this book. We're working through issue 6 now, but the art for issue 1 is we're close to the end of that. But getting that script in, and then getting that art coming through when Sajad sends, he'll send some stuff over in a text, and it's like it just if I don't know, it feels like it feels like a Friday. And what I mean is just that feeling when you were a kid and you knew it was Friday and you get out of school and you just your time is your own, or you could go do a thing. It was the weekend come. That's how it feels. It's really exciting. He just sent me some pages last night that I got to get into. But again, it's such a good collaboration because I get to I want this book to feel cinematic. I've had this thing in my head for so long, and as it continues to evolve, more and more ideas come, and you want to be real selective. Like I don't want to make it too heavy or too thick, right? You
yeah,
want to keep the gumbo the right consistency,
yeah,
and but I do want it to have a feeling, a cinematic approach, and like really put the reader in the story in the best way possible. And it's it's this is a visual medium, and so as you read these words and you look at these photos, I mean these illustrations, it's just it drops you into this world, and it feels as unique as I wanted it to be and I envisioned it to be. So it's really good. I'll do some red lines and draw over some things, and we'll rework some panels. But I just appreciate that, and also I appreciate the fact that I don't have to sit and draw all this stuff, right? Like,
I know you. I know you feeling that part. I know you have your.
and again, it's a trusted hand, so it's not like oh man, I gotta pull somebody along. Like Sajad and I, again, we've been working together so long. There's it's a quick, it's not an unspoken thing, but it's just we have a great working relationship. So I can say something, and it might be gibberish to somebody else, but he understands what I'm saying. He picks up on it real quick, and then he's off. He's like, okay, like this, and it's like, yes, exactly like that. So, but I'm really excited. I'm really excited for it. It's taken longer than I anticipated, but at the same time, not really, because I know that these things are a lengthy process, and we're talking about 6 books right away. So these 6 are gonna take some time, and I wanted to make sure that the story flowed,
Yeah,
and it has so many characters in it that I just want to make sure, again, like I'm serving everybody well, or setting up everybody well enough so that the reader and the audience, as it builds, will be invested into these characters. You never know. You look at Marvel or DC, and
Mhm.
like how many off-brand characters or characters that started as just like one-offs now have their own series and are some of the more popular characters that we see cross over into TV and film. And it just goes to show you, like, you never know what will resonate with people. You can only hope, but you never know. And um, and so for me, I just want to make sure that I treat the characters with such care, and so that they can, some of them can live far beyond the title character, which is the Flyboy, or not far beyond, but live alongside for a long,
Yeah.
for a long time. Flyboy is himself.
I'm always, and even I haven't met all the characters and everything, but I'm sure it's also gonna be interesting too to see how people receive, because like how I guess like how people receive what people want to see, what people want to see more of. Like getting the feedback in that way is probably going to be really cool too. I mean, I know for me that's I'm going to be interested in that aspect of it too. But as far as like graphic novels and comic books and stuff, like what were some of your favorites, if you have any?
Um, I think a lot of the usual stuff, like Frank Miller's Dark Knight. I mean, pretty much everything Frank has done, not everything, but a lot of things that Frank Miller's done. I was a big, and still am a big X-Men, Spider-Man fan. Um, Hulk is my favorite hero, but with the Incredible Hulk books, it was hit or miss a lot of times. So different runs, some are pretty good. I still read graphic novels to this day. So I think recently, what I've been real consumed with is I think DC is killing it right now, and I've never fully bought into being a DC guy, but I think the absolute run of Absolute Batman is just pure insanity in the best way possible. And I love when, and I look forward to this in success, but when you can take a character that is known and beloved and sort of remix the world and the elements and present it in a different way. And that's kind of like what Marvel did with the Ultimate series. That's what DC's doing with the Absolute series, where you're familiar with all of the elements and the recipe, but now they're just presented differently, and they shake things up and add things and make things a bit more current. And so again, I know cart before the horse. I need to get the first stuff out, but I hope in success I can do that one day with my characters, and evolve them and remix, redo, remaster, do all the things.
It's just because there's so many ways, there's so many iterations and vibes that you can give. It's exciting because it's like we could go on, like we could keep going and going and
Yep.
going and going and going. And I love like I love big thinking and cinematic world building in that way. And I also saw that you did trading cards, which I think is really which I think is really cool. And I think those small collectible items contribute to that. And I think a lot of those
Yeah.
things are overlooked. But again, story building. I would love to like have like that vibe of having a oh, I didn't realize that was, yeah, you didn't know Flyboy had this and you didn't know this character has this, like that. And like learning through other people is an exciting part about, well, I guess like storytelling in general, but specifically like comic books and graphic
Yeah.
novels and things like that. And I think it's cool that you were saying that you are still reading and consuming and taking in the graphic novels. Do you have
Yeah.
any other?
This is it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. What was you gonna say?
No, I was just going to say, I think there's moments where people who receive a certain level of notoriety in one thing do something else, and
Yep.
it can be seen a few different ways as a cash grab, or it's it's sort of a flash in the pan. It's something just to do. Like, oh, I want to try my hand at that because I've never done it. For me, if I ever deviate from the main path, which is painting, sculpting, you can believe that like I'm putting in the time, the effort, and the energy, and it's something that I really believe in, and it's not, oh, Hebru Brantley's just doing a comic and it's a lark. And like for me, my goal is to have this be an ongoing series. You know, I want to have a really successful run as a series, and be able to do limited spin-offs with other characters and sort of show bigger parts of the world. And I plotted all that out, but it's just a matter of making sure that the first thing hits as hard as possible so that
Right.
it opens the door for all of those things.
And I can imagine like it's so frustrating as as an artist when people get get all get in a tizzy about artists dipping into other mediums, but it's like certain artists, like, is it, are we surprised? I mean, like, if you already look at the collection of work that they've already like developed on, like, are we shocked? Like, I think there's even certain music artists, when they dip and dab into other mediums, I'm like, this the when you listen to their music, you're playing movies in your head. Like, why is it surprising? I think it's fascinating that people can have a reaction in that way. And then wrapping up, I have a few more things I want to know. Is there a medium that you haven't explored yet that you're curious or that you wanna dip and dab in?
Um, I don't know if it's I haven't explored yet. I think it's more being able to explore further would be
Mhm.
the thing. Like I mentioned, I love film, and so you know, it's I want to make them. I'm
Yeah,
going to make them features, not shorts. I've done shorts, I've done music videos, uh, but features is sort of the next goalpost for me. Um, and that it's about storytelling no matter what I'm doing. And so obviously that's to me that's one of the highest forms of that is animation, live action, but feature length storytelling is definitely next on the list.
yeah, I see. I big see the vision of that. That's exciting to think about. 'Cause that's exciting to think about, um, your rendition of that. But my last question is, out well, I don't want to say out of everything you've ever made, because it's a lot, but what comes to your mind when you think about like projects that have been most transformative for your artistry, and as far as you being a creative, like not necessarily the biggest project, but um a transformative project for you as
Well, I think my biggest project was the most transformative project, and that was I did an immersive art experience called Nevermore Park, and it was in Chicago, opened 2019, I believe, and it was supposed to just run for like a month and a half, and it ended up running for 6 months. COVID kind of shut us down, but that to me was an opportunity to really stretch as an artist, to do something that wasn't just white walls and art, but more put the viewer into the world and create a world both visually and sonically. Um, that to me, I learned a lot doing that, and uh, it was just something that was just so amazing, that I want to do more of. And I think it also taught me how people can view the work, and um, I think how the how people should engage and approach the work, or how they could potentially, versus again the traditional ways of the art world. Um, and yeah, it was a really amazing experience.
That's super cool. I love that. I love the importance of the immersion and developing that cinematic vibe. For sure, it's very admirable, and I think that a lot of artists um, could could benefit from exploring what that looks like for them in their creative medium as well. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much again for chatting about all things art and album covers.
Awesome, thank you, appreciate you.